Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Future Finishes. You're in Hamilton, Ohio, but tell us about the facility and all that you all offer for your customers.
Yep. We are a primarily copper and tin plater.
Hmm.
90% of our workload is aluminum. So we're plating copper and tin onto aluminum.
Hmm.
Um, Most of these aluminum, well, all of these aluminum fittings are for electrical components, housing and development. So we have a 25,000 square foot building.
Hmm.
We have one automated PLC Allen Bradley barrel line, and
Hmm.
then we have a few manual rack lines. The barrel line it's quite large. In fact, these are some of the biggest barrels I've ever worked with. So
Mm.
we're able to produce high volumes of aluminum
Mm.
um, by thousands of pounds, which is a lot considering aluminum's light. So
Right.
um, that's us. We are located in Hamilton. The company was the Future Finishes has been in this building since 1992 and has been
Okay.
operating as such since.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that because you've had many years' experience in finishing. But September of 2020, which is, if
Yeah.
we can all remember at that time, we weren't doing much, a lot of us. But at that point, you had an opportunity to buy the company, which is now Future Finishes. Tell us about that. Walk us back through that. Uh, the decision to purchase the company. I think you had a
Mhm.
partner at the time, but talk about that whole scenario. What all went on back then?
Yeah, so that year was weird for everybody.
Hmm.
Very volatile, uncertain times. So um, when Future Finishes, when the advertisement for its sale came across my radar, I was working in Michigan at the
Hmm.
time, and this was, of course, during the pandemic. Um, but at that point where I was at in Michigan, at the position I was in, there was no further growth.
Hmm.
It was compensated very fairly, but I ultimately knew way prior to that owning and
Hmm.
operating a plating facility is what I wanted to do. So I've been scoping out facilities for a long time. Um, and you always get there's a at least two a year that seem to pop up in like Alabama or
Right.
California. And it's
Right.
like, well, I want one, but I don't want one that bad.
Right.
And then when, Future Finishes came for sale and they're in Cincy, it's like, well, that's closer to where I'm from, which is the Columbus, Indiana area. And it's like, that's the perfect triangle between,
Hmm.
Indy, Louisville, and Cincinnati. And there's just a lot of prime development
Right.
there. And so yeah, we started we started scoping it out, and that's where we went.
Right. Yeah. You were telling me it wasn't doing so good at the time, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
something that, I mean, you really had to kind of come in. What were the issues maybe they were having, and what was your thoughts about whether you could rejuvenate it as much as you wanted
Mm-hmm.
to? Yeah.
Yeah. So typically, when a business is for sale, it's for sale for a reason.
Mm.
Not most of the time, not good ones. This was one of those cases. So prior to the pandemic, Future Finishes was declining in sales and work for many of years.
Mhm.
The founder actually he had passed in around early mid 2000s area.
Mm.
And so it was just kind of left mismanaged. They did last a long time, but it was very mismanaged, and quality sales workload just declined heavily.
Right.
So they were doing pretty poorly before the pandemic, and then once the pandemic hit, it just kind
Right.
of kicked them while they were down, and they were on the verge of selling or closing the doors. I mean, that's where they were. If they didn't
Right.
have any interested buyers, they couldn't piece it together. So yeah. So when we purchased, it was well, it was a very long process. You do all the due diligence you can of the business. You
Hmm.
you read on what's presented to you, but you truly don't know until you're here. And the
Right.
purchasing process was 8 to 9 months as normal.
Mm.
And then once you get in here, it's worse than what you would expect in a
Right.
sense. Once you get in here and start operating,
Right.
and that's what we've seen. I mean, the the workflow we did have, which was very low, but uh, when we would process the parts, the quality was just so horrible in this as is situation I remember some of my initial first thoughts. I was looking at these parts as I'm unloading them, and I'm like, who is buying these parts?
Right.
I mean, and just from
Right.
where I come from, in
Right.
automotive and the finishing, and it was a lot of work. We can get
Hmm.
in depth about everything we did, but that's
Right.
just a small scope of it.
Right. Yeah. And I know you had mentioned that you had brought someone with you. It was a friend who
Mm-hmm.
kind of he a partner in your business, or you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of brought him to work with you there, or
Yeah, yeah. So I brought him with me. I convinced him to come with me. He wasn't a purchasing partner. Everything was through me and the government and the bank, SBA.
right.
This is I worked. So I started working with his name is Wes. I started working with
Hmm.
him at Right Way in Columbus. That's where we could both kind of started. I
Hmm.
started in the plating department there. They have their own little internal plating shop, and he started in maintenance. And we're about the same age. And I remember I was uh, working on the plating line of something at Right Way, and this is kind of how I met him.
Hmm.
And I at that point where I was, I knew all of the plating stuff, you could say, but that ran on a PLC program, which I wasn't familiar with, and I was just sitting
Hmm.
there kind of scratching my head of an issue, and he just kind of comes over my shoulder and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's a relay or such or such." I was like, interesting. This
Right.
guy kind of knows his mechanical side. So we worked together for a long time, and then I convinced him to come up here with me. Uh, he definitely jump start. He's no longer with me now. He went back home after about
Okay.
a year, but he did jump start this process significantly while working with our line. To put things in example, as I stated, our main line is an Allen Bradley controlled barrel line. Well, when I purchased the facility, it wasn't running an auto.
Mm.
So they were using double the operators to run it in manual.
Manual. Wow.
The
Mm.
reason it wasn't running an auto was just because of years of neglect and issues. They couldn't maintain or had the specialties to operate and fix it. So Wes was able to not only get the line running in auto, but he also set up numerous programs that we're still using now.
Right. That had to be critical to get that automation, especially with workforce as it is to get it operating the way it should be. Right. I mean, that had to be
Yeah,
critical to get that right.
yeah. The volume at the time didn't call for it, but it's like there's no way we can operate this big auto line in manual. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
we had and are doing big plans, so we know we needed it in auto
Right.
for sure.
How many employees stayed with you there when you purchased it? How many employees did you have total?
Uh, so when I purchased, there was two leftover employees. Yeah,
Okay. And how
one in
many?
the
Yeah. Go ahead.
one in the office, one in operations. Yeah,
Gotcha. And how many do you have now? I know it's been
we
over
have
3 years.
about 5 or 6 at any given
Gotcha.
time. Yeah.
Right. I guess the first 6, 7, 8 months of an operation. You're the owner. You're the guy in the seat running it. How did all that go for you? I know you had probably had so much to do, and so many only hours in a day. And but how were you able to pull that off? What were some of the priorities you had to get done? I know you're getting the equipment going, and I guess talking to customers and kind of introducing yourself to those people and getting things going. But
Yeah.
it had to be like drinking from a fire hose a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to explain it. So, because with purchasing and not having a fundamental team, you're wearing all the hats, and yeah, it was the chemistry side, the sales side, a small extent on the mechanical side, and just and holding everything together. But yeah, the first 9 months, it was awful. I mean, we weren't making any money, of course,
Right.
and just things were not going our way. And with the vast plating experience I had prior to, I don't want to say I came in with an arrogant tone, but maybe a little more confident, I
Hmm.
guess. Which wasn't
Right.
necessarily a bad thing, but where I'm getting at is when we started troubleshooting all this chemistry, I was second doubting everything that I knew as a plater and everything I know, and I was like, and it broke me essentially. And
Hmm.
you kind of pick yourself back up, slow down, start over, and then we slowly started figuring things out. And a lot of that had to do with the double metal component
Hmm.
of tin plating. You have to have the copper, and then you're learning this aluminum world with all the different material aluminum is made out of. But on top of all the factors you have already existing that aren't in your favor. Bad chemistry, bad equals bad quality, and
Right.
so there was numerous processes,
Mm.
and not to get too far ahead, but
Sure.
years of neglect on the plating line and having quality issues there. In turn, also years of neglect and issues with the wastewater department too. So
Right.
everything was a balancing act, and we didn't come in here with millions of dollars either. There was
Right.
very low capital to spend to get things going. So you
Right.
you really
Right.
had to think about where you're going to put your money and what's going to contribute best out of that.
Right. Right. Were you able to get help from suppliers and things like that to help you kind of right the ship and get the chemistry and everything that you need to dialed in, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah. I brought in a lot of familiar suppliers that I've worked with in the past, and what's odd, and we're still finding that here at Future is uh, nothing is the same as what you would call like industry standard here. Like it just doesn't work here, and that's anybody from chemical suppliers to manufacturer suppliers to some contractors I have in here, like with electrical work. It's just funny. But
Mhm.
everybody comes in and is like, yeah, we can knock this out in so and so days, and I'm like, yeah, you should double it. You should just double your time here because that's
Right.
that's what we go through. So I did have a lot of help, especially from to name drop somebody, Dave Bennett
Sure.
from Dipsol.
Right. Hmm.
He was very and still is very helpful with troubleshooting. Um, uh, 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 some help as well from All Star Chemicals. They
Hmm.
provide a lot of our proprietary stuff. But then as we started isolating into segregated issues, we started bringing professionals in of that issues like rectifiers and barrels and stuff like that. And what's kind of comical as well is their opinions.
Right.
You bring a rectifier guy and he's like, it is funny how many times we've heard this. If it was my
Right.
place, I change out all these rectifiers.
I'm
It's
sure.
like,
I'm sure they
but
would. Yeah.
I've heard that across the board, and it's like, well, as the plater, you have to piece it all together slowly.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's gonna say when you talked about that, is you're in a perfect world, this is what you would do, right? But
Mm,
you're in a day to day reality where it's just you've got to do what you've got to do today to get things moving along and everything.
mm.
It's been what I guess it's 4 years, right? I mean, we've just or 3 years, I guess.
3 years, yeah.
3 years, 3 years. Yeah.
Little over, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I know you've increased your sales, you've increased your quality, and more importantly, you've increased your quality of how things are done. It seems like you are on the right track. Do you feel that things are
Oh yeah,
moving in
yeah.
that direction?
I mean, like I said, the 9 months was horrible. The first 9 months, we didn't turn a profit in that time. And in a macro view, though, you take a step back and you look, and it's like, well, you're actually doing pretty good,
Hmm.
considering where we are now. But when you're down in the trenches every day, especially during the beginning, it just doesn't feel like that. It's very hectic. But
Right.
but yeah, we have been able to increase our poundage by a lot. I was just taking down some notes when I purchased Future. They were receiving in about 3,000 pounds of aluminum each week, and
Hmm.
we're on average a little over 20,000 pounds each week
Wow.
as what we
Wow. It's
receive
amazing.
in. So, and that's with keeping the same. I mean, we have increased employees, but that was, um,
Right.
I was on operations when I first started to keep things, slow. It's really with all the same operators, same shift, same line, to be as efficient as possible.
Right. Right. And you said mostly, the 10 on aluminum and those are for electrical components, really what
Hmm.
you were talking about, right? With
Yep.
that. Yeah. Have you
Yep.
thought about, adding any other type of processes down, to try to, uh,
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I understand deeply is we need to diversify. I mean
mhm.
that is solely what we do is copper and tin plating, and it's just I've been questioning this for over a year. Like, where do we go? We're trying to look at something that complements what we already do, and still be competitive. So,
Right.
like zinc, for example. I know zinc very well. I know zinc best, but it seems like everybody and their brother does zinc. So it's
Yeah.
not something I want to get into right away. But we're still we're still analyzing that, I guess you can say.
Right.
But we do need to diversify for sure.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was gonna say where it could take you, like I said, in kind of all the eggs in one basket. Nobody wants to be that way, but you've got to
Yeah.
do it in a smart way, and that's got to be
Right.
clear with that. Sitting in the chair, certainly I didn't know if you had a lot of sales experience at your prior one. It sounds like you had a lot of technical experience, but sales. What has opened your eyes most about running a facility and being the head person that makes the final decisions and supposed to bring in the customers too. I mean, that's kind of the essence of it too, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. So sales, that would be true. I was never really in sales, but I was always customer based. I was always speaking to the customer, whether it's about quality, and that's wherever I was,
right,
damage control, I guess you can say, at places. So getting out there and speaking, or trying to represent, wasn't it kind of came naturally. Plus, when what helped more too is with owning my own facility here and implementing changes that I feel is right. You take more pride in that, which is easier to sell, just naturally to
right,
somebody. If you feel passionate about what you're doing, it's easy to shed light on that to prospective buyers. So obviously the smartest thing to do was to reach out to existing customers, which was very slim, or recently past customers. And that's what we did. We pulled up a lot, all of them, and that was probably the big success driver is getting more work in, especially our larger companies, customers rather. But there was a lot that they didn't want to come back, and what didn't help was the poor reputation Future had in the industry
right,
that I was. That I was unaware of.
right,
It's almost like, wow, I should have changed the name a bit, um, but every customer, every chemical vendor has a story about Future
right,
Finishes, and it's not a good one. And it's
right,
like, yeah, that's us, but that's not us now,
right,
And you just go
right.
around your day and you try to prove yourself. So um, that's probably one of the harder parts that we still deal with every now and then with new customers. But yeah, our quality is really good. Um,
Right.
you know, uh, with prior experience, tracking, measuring is everything. You have to know where you are currently to set a good baseline to where you want to be. And so we keep really good track on where we're at, and our internal fallout is even way below plating standards, and
Hmm.
our externals are follow the same way. So
Right.
and then there was we bought some of our capital expenditures we made was on quality equipment from the very beginning, just to meet specs that we should have already been applying to begin with
Right.
prior to my ownership, such as like an X-ray and stuff like that. So yeah, all of that's here. Everything's
You
on
mentioned
key.
earlier, even things like your wastewater treatment was a problem, right? And you had to tackle that. And lo and behold, you just won a very nice, prestigious award
Yeah,
from your local municipality on your wastewater treatment. Tell us about that. I mean, had you had much experience managing wastewater treatment
yeah,
problems with that? And then
yeah.
what did it all take to get it all righted?
Yeah. So I took a lot of wastewater classes early on at Right Way, and which helped tremendously here. I went to the state college there, specializing in wastewater treatment. And the concept behind that is, well, I know I'm always going to be in plating, and where you go in plating, there's always going to be waste treatment. So
Hmm.
let's
Right.
make this a combination. Um, so when I bought Future, that's kind of some information that, looking back, I should have performed a little bit more due diligence on. I just took
Hmm.
paper at its word, I guess. But I for the first couple of months, our attention span was on our plating line solely,
Right.
and I didn't. It's not like I was ignoring waste treatment, but I figured it's running how it should because we haven't had any past issues. It was one of the questions I asked,
Right.
and so it wasn't until we had our first outside sampling performed by the lab. Hamilton works a little different, so
Hmm.
some of the quarters I sample, some of the quarters they sample. They have an outside lab come in, and we failed a sample test. I think that first one was for zinc. and and so that's also the first time the city coordinator came in, and we set up a meet and greet. Super nice guy, and he was like, "Hey, so I know you just bought the place and stuff, and this was early November of 2020. He's like, but this is Future Finish's seventh non-compliance in a row,
Ooh,
quarterly
wow.
samples. So that's almost 2 years, in
Right. I
a
was going to
row.
say, yeah.
And I'm like, oh wow, okay. And so
Wow.
I was immediately placed on a compliance schedule with the city.
Mm,
He's like, look, you'll have to go in front of the city board and stuff and work out some arrangements. Basically, what are you going to do to get back in compliance? He goes, I can talk to them the best I can to explain to them the situation that you just got to place and stuff. So he did a really good job. I was still on a compliance schedule, but now we're focusing on waste treatment, right? So now here
right.
comes the balancing act. It's like we don't have an efficient line running yet. We're not making any money. If there's no money being made from the plating line, it sure can't fund waste treatment. So it's like, what do we do? And it was really irritating that we failed for zinc of all things, because zinc is what I
Mm,
know best, and it's what I know best to treat in waste treatment. And I'm like, we're not
right.
even zinc platers.
That's right.
we're
I was going to
we're
say,
we're tin platers. And
yeah.
so this is where I learned about cyanide treatment and stuff like that from our copper baths. And so we did make investments, I guess you can say, but in an overall view, the dollar figure on those investments aren't high. It's just there was, in waste treatment alone, there was a lot of low hanging fruit that was easy to tackle, just so much of it. And
Right.
when there's
Right.
so much of it, that alone is hard to do than say for one big project, you got hundreds of little ones. And
Right.
so we changed out pumps, we changed out lines, we changed out rates, feed rates,
Hmm.
started dialing in our water consumption on the plating line, all this easy stuff. And one thing led to another. We were passing tests. We started passing
Right.
tests. So we took it a step further, and I was able to. My old employer, Right Way Fastener, actually gave me their old atomic absorption machine. They had
Mm,
purchased a new one. They gave me their old one. We had to pay a good chunk to have it refurbished.
hmm.
But now that's not something we can use for sampling because it's not certified. But at least we're able to sample on our own when we need to help make those changes. So yeah, long story short with that, the city was super impressed. We kept on good relationships with them. I mean, we went from like day and night difference here. They've
Right.
never seen Future wastewater like department
Right.
like it is.
Well, to
And
see
they,
that, to see you took it seriously enough, right?
yeah,
You weren't going to
yeah,
just let it go off, and
yeah,
it's hard. I mean, it's got to be a gut punch to spend time and money on something that's really not a revenue generator for you, right? It's not going to like putting in a new line and things like that, spending those expenditures. But it's something from a conscious effort. You're not going to be in business if you don't take care of this and
hmm,
get it operating, like you said, in the right way.
yeah. Conscience, and that's a good word, because the way I live is I got to look at myself in the mirror every day.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so they nominated us for the Carl G. Vocal Award, which is like the Southeast District of Ohio
Mm-hmm.
committee, and basically it was given for our vast improvements to waste
Great.
treatment. So we're the 2024 recipients.
There, well,
In January,
congratulations.
yeah, in January we have our the conference about it, and I give a speech of everything that we have done to our waste treatment in detail. But it
Right.
is something we're very proud of. It doesn't look pretty. She's not painted, and it looks like a waste treatment department, but she is
Right.
very functionally sound.
Right. And like I said, that's what, I know a lot of facilities they rise and fall on their wastewater, right? That's got to be able to handle the throughput and everything you're doing there. And so what do you think, looking out, your company's name's Future. What's looking out for you? It seems like it's taken you a good chunk of time to kind of get things righted, right? And kind of get things going. Where do you see it going in the next couple of years? Now you talked about possibly looking at adding some things, but yet your core seems to be doing okay for you, right? Your
Yeah,
copper and tin. So,
yeah,
um,
and that kind of goes back to the diversity question. We have some things in the pipeline, some small things, but it's not something I would say is really going to take us to the next level. We do have some feelers out there. We operate some small rack work. We have some potential to increase that, but it's still putting us in that same category. So it would be a better. I could answer it better if my concern right now is the times. I don't want to say they're bad
right.
times this year, but what I feel, and actually some of my customers feel as well, it's just uncertain times.
Right.
It's not bad. It's actually relatively good, but nobody really knows what
Right.
the short
What
forecast
right,
is.
what the next quarter is going to bring. It changes so fast, and
Yeah.
that's always a problem with that. Yeah.
It is. It makes it hard to plan. Should I spend more this year? Should I hold back? You don't know. Those are some of the questions. So
Mhm.
that plays in part with what's our next move, and we're still not really there yet. Um,
Right.
Other than we need to diversify for sure.
Right. It's funny. I mean, in the past 3 years, I'm sure there's been times where you've kind of laid awake at night thinking, "What in the world have I done?" You know, you know. But then, there's that. You're an owner. You're a business owner now, right? I mean, and that seemed to be the goal that you had for a long time. Not too many
Mm,
people want to be a business owner. It's tough.
mm.
It's tough to do. But looking back, I mean, it sounds like it's been a great learning experience for you. And like I said, it seems like you're over the hump now a little bit with that. Certainly, you got
Mhm.
all that behind you, right? Of just kind of, you know, going in and seeing where everything was. Like I said, learning about the wastewater wasn't doing well, learning maybe some equipment wasn't working as best as it could, but you've got that behind you, and that's got to be a reassuring feeling, right? Going forward,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you know that's all in the rearview mirror right now.
yeah. That's for sure. I've explained it to others a few times. The best analogy I can give, it's like owning this business, and I'm sure it's very similar to other business owners. It's like especially starting out, it's like a roller coaster ride.
Mm,
There's a lot of dips and curves, and you're just hanging on. But there's a very few highlights, and those highlights are high enough to, it's like it gives you the feeling, yeah, I want to stick with this still. Um,
right.
but I mean, it's certainly stressful, especially the stress has eased back a bit, but it's certainly stressful. But at the same time, it's a different kind of stress. I've worked for and in stressful situations, but when you're working for yourself, it's a better kind of stress, if that's a thing,
Yeah.
because you know what you need to do to implement and to relieve that stress, and that's all it takes.